Hello! I beat you to it that
Hello.
time.
You did beat me to it this time. You were ready.
Yes.
So what are we talking about today?
Today, hello everybody. Welcome.
Yes, welcome.
We are going to spend a bit of time talking about the Death House, which
Yes.
is an introductory, sort of a scrambling for the word, but anyway, an intro to Curse of Strahd.
Yeah, it's a good way to start. Brings you from level 1 to level 3.
Yep. It's not necessarily something you have to do.
It is optional, yeah.
But in my instance, as a first time ever being a DM, I found it to be super helpful. So if you have never done a campaign before and you're doing Curse of Strahd, I would recommend doing Death House, because it definitely, the nature of it, I think, is good for some sort of basic game mechanics. And
I would definitely recommend Death House if you're a new GM. Maybe even if you're not planning on doing Curse of Strahd, just do Death House as a 1 or 2 shot adventure. I think there's a lot of use in just kind of learning in this really enclosed space.
Yep.
There really isn't any way for the players to get that far into the weeds.
Yep. Anyway, I had a lot of fun with this. And at the time when I ran Death House, Wayworn Worm was not yet in our adventuring party.
Correct.
We had started with a couple other friends that weren't able to continue on with the adventure due to having busy lives. So Wayworn Worm and his partner Wormette joined us to take their place.
Yep.
But
like 1 or 2 sessions after, I think.
yeah, I think it might have been immediately after. But anyway, so Death House. Where do we want to start with Death House? I guess how you get there.
So when Death House is the first real thing that happens in Curse of Strahd. Depending on which entry point into Curse of Strahd you do, there are like 4 or 5 different ones. We both chose the same one, where it was just they go to sleep in the woods one night and they wake up and they're in Barovia.
Yeah. I think I had my players meet in a very cliche tavern as a bunch of first-time adventurers looking for anything to build up their skills, and they went camping as they were headed towards somewhere, I don't know where, and woke up and they were surrounded by fog, deadly fog.
Yes. So Death House is easiest to run if you choose that intro point, because you have them walk to Barovia, and Barovia starts off totally in fog, and Rose and Thorn, who are 2 children that you meet, are in the middle of the street, and they are the first NPCs that your players encounter.
Yes. We should say the village of Barovia.
Yes.
Barovia, the land, and then there's an actual village, also named Barovia. And it's a very common place to enter into the land of Barovia. You can either enter there, or you can enter on the other end, which is near Krezk.
I wouldn't recommend that other end, because Barovia has a slight leveled areas, and Barovia is the side that has the lower level areas.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, without like massively reworking some of the basics that are included in the book, you would probably want to come in at Barovia.
Yeah, coming in at the Barovia side is the better idea, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
There's very limited support in the book for what if you don't want to come in on this side.
Right. So,
Rose.
using the fog as
Mm-hmm.
a basically as a what's the word I'm looking for? The fog basically forces your players. Force is kind of a strong word, but guides your players to the death house in Barovia,
Yes.
the village. And as you mentioned, you meet Rose and Thorn right outside the house in the middle of the street.
And they say that there's a monster in their house.
Yeah. And they're clearly appear to be scared. And what good adventurer wouldn't feel sympathy or empathy for these children and want to help?
Yes, especially when you learn that there's a baby in the house.
Right. And remind me how that comes out.
So it starts off with a thing to read, and the gravel road leads to a village. Its tall houses dark as tombstones. Nestled among these solemn dwellings are a handful of closed-up shops. Even the tavern is shut tight. A soft whimpering draws your eyes toward a pair of children standing in the middle of an otherwise lifeless street. Then you interact with the children, and then you add the following. After shushing the boy, the girl turns to you and says, "There's a monster in our house." She then points to a tall brick row house that has seen better days. Its windows are dark, it has a gated portico on the ground floor, and the rusty gate is slightly ajar. The houses on either side are abandoned, their windows and doors boarded up. And then if you question the children, they don't know what the monster looks like, but they've heard its terrible howls. Their parents keep it locked in the basement, and there's a baby in the third floor nursery.
Mm.
If the players decide to question the children, which they're going to. I don't know if I've ever played with a group that wouldn't question the children.
I guess if you were playing with people who, I don't know, just didn't give a fuck about anything.
Well, luckily with the way that this starts off, the rest of Barovia is locked up tight. So there's nothing else to interact with.
Yeah, there's really nothing else drawing
It's
their attention.
it's a pretty strong signal. Do this. It is probably the strongest bit of railroading in the entire campaign.
Yeah.
And then the death house is very atmospheric. There's a lot of spooky things throughout the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason why we're talking about this it's now November, but part of the reason why we're talking about Curse of Strahd in October and November is spooky.
Spooky. Yeah,
But-
I like that. That was one of the things that was kind of fun.
Yeah, I think it sets up what you can expect from Curse of Strahd.
Right. That there's even if things seem to be innocuous on the surface, there's horrible things happening.
Yeah. I think other than that, Death House is a very, very straightforward dungeon. Which is not an issue. There's nothing inherently wrong with a straightforward dungeon.
Yeah.
Especially if you're new.
Definitely. And you get to run some baddies that are not terribly hard to do.
No, I think there's a good variety. I mean, there's an animated suit of armor. There's a ghost. There's a couple of... I don't remember if they're ghouls or ghasts. They're one of them. There's a mimic. Shambling Mound is the big baddie at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the differences between your game and my game was that your players like found the mimic and I think they were gas and stayed in that bedroom, or
Yeah.
mine just they didn't even go in there. They went pretty much straight to the cultist chamber.
Yeah.
With the altar and the shambling mound.
So basically, when you end up in the basement, the entire basement is essentially a circle. There's two paths that you can go left or right, but if you go far enough in either direction, you'll end up coming from the other direction to where you started.
Mm-hmm.
And the cultists are to the right, and your players went to the right, mine went to the left. Because as everyone knows, good adventurers go left.
Well, if that isn't an indictment on our friends, I don't know what is.
Keep in mind that a third of for Death House, our groups actually have no overlap for that one adventure.
Yep.
Because of the 3 players that we share, because I don't count myself, because I didn't play in the game I ran, the 2 that started in your game and joined my game missed the Death House, and then me and Wormet missed the Death House in your game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the start of the Death House, you go through 3 floors. You probably get possessed by ghosts.
Yes, probably.
There's an animated broom that's an optional encounter. And I think it's a very good encounter because you open a door, it goes to a closet. The only thing in the closet is a broom that attacks you. And against first level characters who had just finished a fight, that's a deadly broom. I've run Death House twice with 2 different groups, and in both cases, the broom knocked someone out.
Dang. I guess I didn't realize that when I did it. It didn't knock anybody out. I think it gave him a hard time, but
the way it happened in both of my games, a single person opened the door and stepped in, and they were at like half health or less. So 1 hit from the broom and it knocked them out.
Wow. That's awesome. That's funny.
So yeah, that's the thing that's happened both times.
Mm-hmm.
You meet Rose and Thorn and find out that the ones you meet out front aren't actually Rose and Thorn. They are part of the house, the evilness of the house.
Yeah. Projections of the
Yeah.
horrible house.
There's a library. You get the deed to Old Bone Grinder in the library, and there's a secret door, where you can get a note from Strahd, which is the first indication of Strahd if you pick the starting point that we did. There's a wizard's book. I think there's 1 or 2 other things of note in there.
Yeah, I think there's a key to something, but I don't remember what. Might be to the kid's bedroom or something.
Let me check.
But
The library does have a key which unlocks a door to the children's room. Yep, you remembered correctly.
yeah, so basically what happens is the house is 3 stories, I think,
Yes.
Um,
Well,
well, I mean, as far
first,
as they
second,
know.
third, and attic. So it's
Okay.
4 stories.
So you basically work your way up. The players work their way up to the top of the house, and that's where they discover
The children's room.
children's room, and they discover children's deceased bodies that have clearly been there for a while.
Yep.
They might get possessed by a ghost, or
They
might
probably
not.
do get possessed by ghosts, especially at that level.
They also have an opportunity to discover the secret stairs that run from the attic down to
The basement. Yep.
down to the very depths of hell. No. And I can't remember if there's maybe a couple ways you can find the secret stairs.
The very easy way to do that is go into the children's room. There's a dollhouse of the house that contains the secret door to the stairs, and then the players go, "What?
Mm-hmm.
What's this?" So yeah, that's how they tend to find it. As we kind of mentioned, there's a whole bunch of spooky throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, pictures that have, like, if you look at it from a distance, appears to be like
Normal, if maybe a
nothing that
little
stands
weird.
out. And then as you get closer and you kind of look a little bit closer, you see things like
Skulls, snakes.
eyeballs,
Yeah.
yeah, blood, whatever.
And then there's, wonderful piece of storytelling through set dressing. It tells the story about how this baby Walter is Rosenthorn's half brother, between the dad and the maid.
Oh, that's right. I
Yeah.
forgot about that.
And the mom knows, but hasn't done anything.
Yeah, scandalous.
Yes, but Rosenthorn were locked in the room in the attic and then forgotten about. And that's how they died.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty terrible way to die. Like, basically starving to death.
In your own house.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm kind of struggling to say a little bit more because it's a really good atmospheric straight dungeon. It's not. I mean, each level is fairly small. There's like 5 to 8 rooms per level. It's a really, really great introduction to Barovia and Curse of Strahd, and I definitely recommend it. However, it's not super easy to talk about because it's just read the chapter. You set up the maps. Players go, I want to go into this room. You go, excellent, and then you read the section on what's in that room. I think you could run the Death House with 0 preparation. I think you don't have to do prep work. It's always better to do some prep work at least.
Yeah.
But I think you could run just straight from the appendix.
Yeah.
And then the basement is, again, pretty straightforward. There's a lot more going on. Really early on, you discovered some tombs where you notice that 2 of them are labeled Rose and Thorn, and my players were just like, oh, let's go get their skeletons and put them to rest. And that cures the haunting, or the possession. I think you've told me in the past your players didn't quite make that connection, because they just kind of rushed through.
Yeah, 1 or 2 people got possessed, and it definitely affected their personalities, which was funny. And I think they they carried on with being possessed, and I kind of forget how that all resolved, but
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't end up putting the corpses to rest, so you skip past that.
And then at some point you find the steps down to the second level, which has 3 rooms. One is a room with odd things in it. In fact, let me kind of go to the odd thing list.
You mean the delightful things?
So, like, a dagger with a rat skull set into the pommel. A desiccated frog lashed to a stick. A 6-inch tall wooden figure of a mummy, its arms crossed over its chest.
Right. So I mean, just the type of common household items that you'd find in typical suburban house.
I mean, maybe your house, not mine.
Oh. Well.
A bag full of bat guano. And
How fresh is that bat guano? Does it say?
does not say. It just says a bag full of bat guano. They do nothing. When my players came across that, they were just like, "These are important. They must be." It's like, okay. How do you want to try and figure out if they're important or not? I think the cleric even cast detect magic on them, and it's just like, they're not magic. None of them.
Yeah.
She's like, what? But they're in places of honor, and they're not magical. And there's also a prison. And in the prison, there's a skeleton that has a gold ring on it. That gold ring's worth a little bit of money. I don't think my players went to the prison, and I think that they I think they just slept there, but didn't really search the prison at all.
Yeah.
And then they lifted the portcullis into the final room. They didn't find the secret door in the prison, I don't think.
Oh. How were they able to lift it?
A really good strength check. Wormet was playing a Goliath fighter.
Mm.
So by the time you're doing this, you're level 2, and she had like a 20 strength. And just rolled high enough.
Nice.
And it's just like, okay, yeah, as you're essentially a half giant, just and then you get into the cultist chamber, and there's a mound of debris over in the corner, which one of my players was like, "That's a shambling mound." I'm like, "No, it's not." Yes, it is. No one. You're not supposed
to.
to.
How would they know that?
I don't know.
This is just a lucky guess. Wild lucky guess.
It's just they guessed and they're like, "That's a shambling mound," and it's just like, you're right. Ugh.
But they didn't know his name, so
It doesn't have a name.
It does have a name.
Does it
It's
really have a
Lorgoth,
name?
the Destroyer, or something like that. At least that's what the cultists call him.
No, it doesn't have a name. No, because the it is Lorgoth the Decayer. We awaken thee. I guess it is Lorgoth the Decayer. You're right. It has a name.
Yep.
And so, basically, the cultists want you to kill someone.
They demand sacrifice.
They demand
'Cause
sacrifice.
That's what they're all about.
And
they're cultists.
They're
I
like-
can't remember if they have a.
they're like ghost cultists at this point. You can't interact with them.
Right, but in terms of who, like, what their cult is all about, is it like a cult for Strahd?
It is a cult to Strahd, yep. A Strahdian cult. And in both of our games, our players elected to not sacrifice anyone. The Shambling Mound attacked. In my game, they killed the Shambling Mound. And in your game, they killed the Shambling Mound, but a player died.
Right. Which I think we've talked about the monk.
Yes, we've talked about the monk.
And the fact that the monk is basically a melee fighter.
Yep.
Not fighter, but a melee character. And the Shambling Mound was able to grapple as they moved in and basically, like, squeeze the life out of them.
Yeah, and then that was a pretty big upset because that was the first session. Not only did this character have a mini printed from, I think it's Hero Forge, but also commissioned artwork of this beautiful portrait of their character. And you're like, hey, we're ending session 1 with your character dead.
Yeah. That definitely, like, sucked all the air out of the room when that happened. Because nobody expects that to happen in the first session.
Yeah.
Luckily, it wasn't like a TPK situation.
But
still.
the player that was most attached to their character lost it in
And had
your
been, like,
first session DMing ever.
Yeah, and this friend had been like, yeah, so excited about this character, you know, because we had decided we were going to do this a couple of months beforehand, and they had, like, had prepped this character well in advance, and we're so excited about using this character and getting to play with it, and they died. But it wasn't final.
Did you find the solution that session, or did it have to be till the next session?
So that session ended with the players carrying the monk's body out of the house, and that was the end of that session. And so after that, I had to think about what I was going to do. I definitely didn't want. I wanted to bring that character back just because of the attachment.
Yeah.
And I wanted I didn't want him, like, ruin my friend's fun.
Yeah, you
So-
didn't want to go, hey, by the way, I know you spent a lot of money on this character, and that's awesome. Please roll a new
But
one.
fuck that character. No, I didn't want to do that. So, yeah, I kind of came up with a...
You came up with a really good way, and as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago in the Berez episode, that's still peppering some narrative hooks that I think are going to start really coming in to effect in the next couple of sessions.
Yep.
In my campaign, since they won without anyone dying, the house attacked them. So they're able to get to the first floor, and then all the doorways had swinging scythes in it, and rats started exploding from the walls.
Yeah. Fun times. Did anybody get maimed by the scythes?
I think someone got hit, but not bad. And they ran out, and the house ate itself.
Yeah.
And then Barovia went to normal.
Yeah, the fog dissipated a little bit.
All of these houses that were abandoned and shut tight, are no longer abandoned and shut tight, and the players are just kind of like, what's going on? So yeah, that's kind of the basics of the Death House. We didn't want to go room by room and just talk about that because we want you to play Curse of Strahd or run it.
Do it. You won't be disappointed.
Yes, and we definitely do recommend start at level 1, do the Death House.
Yeah.
Or you can even start at level 3 and do the Death House at level 3 and just don't level up from the Death House.
Yeah. You totally do that.
That'd be fun. It would be a lot easier, which that depends on your playstyle if easier is a good thing or not. But yeah, so if you're watching on YouTube, do the YouTube things. Comment, like, share, subscribe.
Nice.
If you want to listen to us as a podcast, there's where you can find us in the description down below. If you're listening on podcast, that's great. We're not going to tell you where to find us because you already have.
Good work.
We're on Twitter. We'll happily talk on Twitter or the YouTube comments. To my knowledge, we don't really have a way of talking in the podcast comments. I don't think podcast comments are a thing. I may be wrong. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yes. Something I hear from other podcasts are going into Apple and giving a 5-star rating to help with.
Yes, if you're watching us on a place that has ratings, please rate us highly. We'd appreciate that.
Yes, that'd be great. We can bring you more exciting content.
Yes.
Which we're gonna definitely include much more beyond Curse of Strahd, but we love Curse of Strahd, so that's what
we're kind of going through Curse of Strahd. That's how we're going to start this off. You've already seen hopefully you've already seen or listened to our Halloween episode where we talk about a different system. I'm going to be running that in about a little over a month. We'll probably make a special episode just as a recap for that because Nick is going to play in that.
Yeah. It's going to be great. The idea of it sounds really fun.
Yes.
And spooky.
So, thank you so much for listening or watching. We will see you next week. We're going to have a sort of DM question thing where Nick, as the new DM, is going to ask me questions as I've been DMing for possibly too long. It's been about 15 years now.
Yeah. That is going to be great because you have all that experience and knowledge, and as somebody who's fairly new to the game, I get some insight.
Yeah, and hopefully you won't have to make the same mistakes that I've made over the years.
It's always good to avoid mistakes if you can.
Always good to avoid mistakes if you can.
All right, thank you, people.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.